Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because, our mission today is to unpack a stack of just truly fascinating material.
Yeah, it really is a massive stack of information.
It is. We've been going through some incredible audio analysis by the biblical scholar David Pawson alongside this comprehensive 8-part sermon series titled The Superior Christ.
Which is incredibly detailed.
Very detailed. And our target today, we are exploring one incredibly dense, ancient, and honestly just explosive piece of text, which is the first 3 verses of the book of Hebrews.
Right, just those 3 verses.
Yeah, and we're going to figure out together why this specific text claims to hold the, ultimate mind-bending final word on the cosmos and on humanity.
It is a staggering piece of literature. I mean, those 3 verses do more heavy theological lifting than entire volumes of modern philosophy do.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to start with a quirky detail from this material regarding identity.
Oh, the names thing.
Yeah, exactly. When we think about identity, a name is usually the simplest starting point, right? Most of us have 1 or 2, maybe a middle name.
Sure.
But if you happen to be born into, say, the British royal family, you might pile up like 7 to 10 of them just to cover all your historical bases.
Right, or if you look at fanaticism, people go to ridiculous extremes. The source mentioned that story of the man in Northern Ireland who legally named his son after all 11 football players on his favorite team.
Which is just, what an incredible burden to hand a child on their first day of kindergarten.
Oh, absolutely.
But then you look at the historical text of the Bible, and Jesus is given over 250 names and titles. 250?
Yeah, it's an unprecedented concentration of identity. No other historical figure has had that many titles assigned to them. And that concentration it's exactly what the author of Hebrews is trying to leverage right out of the gate.
Right.
But to understand why, you kind of have to realize how bizarre the book of Hebrews is structurally.
Because it doesn't read like a normal letter.
Exactly. If you read a standard letter from the ancient world, it always has an envelope-style greeting. Like, Paul to the church in Rome or James to the scattered tribes. There is a warm-up.
Some pleasantries.
Right, but Hebrews has no author listed, no address, no gentle pleasantries whatsoever. It just bypasses the handshake entirely and jumps straight into what scholars consider the finest, most majestic classical Greek in the entire New Testament.
It reads with this intense, almost breathless sense of urgency. And for you listening right now, I want you to kind of put yourself in the shoes of that original audience to understand why the author is rushing so much.
Yeah, context is everything here.
It is. Imagine being in this spiritual no man's land. You've left your old, familiar, ancient religion. You've stepped into this new Christian faith. But that initial honeymoon phase...
Which usually lasts about 2 to 3 months before reality bites.
Right, exactly. That phase is completely over.
The adrenaline is totally gone. And think about the psychology of what they were experiencing at that moment. They missed the smells of the temple incense. They missed the predictable ancient rituals.
The comfort of it.
Yeah, and they missed the social safety net of their old community. Now, they're sitting in these small, secretive house churches, likely facing serious social and economic persecution. The gravitational pull of their old, comfortable life is pulling at them really hard.
Have you ever felt that, not just historically, but in your own life, where things get difficult and you just want to retreat to whatever is familiar, even if you know it's not right for you anymore?
It's human nature.
It really is. And this deep dive is really about what happens when you feel that tug to drift backward. But the author of Hebrews insists that going back isn't just a bad idea, it's a catastrophic error in logic.
A massive step backward.
Right. And to understand why, we first have to look at how information was delivered before this specific moment in history.
Because the contrast is everything.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament alone, we see the phrase, "Thus says the Lord," 3,808 times.
Wow. Over 3,000 times.
Yeah, and that information was compiled by 40 different authors writing across 1,400 years in multiple languages.
That is a massive span of time.
It really is. God spoke through poetry, prose, historical records, parables, and visions. It was a huge, multi-generational project.
And the people delivering those messages, the prophets, they paid a horrifying price just for participating.
Oh, the suffering was immense.
Yeah, the sources mention Isaiah was reportedly sawn in half inside a hollow tree trunk. And Jeremiah was thrown into a pitch-black pit of slimy mud to starve.
Just brutal.
They suffered immensely just to deliver their specific fragments of the message.
What's fascinating here is David Pawson's analogy of a jigsaw puzzle to explain why that era was so difficult.
Oh, I love this analogy.
It's brilliant. Think of those Old Testament prophets as people who were handed individual puzzle pieces. One prophet held a piece depicting God's brutal justice. Another held a piece showing his profound mercy.
Right.
Another saw his holiness. But none of them had the lid to the puzzle box.
Wow.
Yeah, they were suffering and dying for fragments, completely unable to see the final, complete picture they were actually helping to construct.
So it's like getting a crucial, life-altering message, but someone is sending it to you via 40 different fragmented text messages over an entire week.
That's exactly it.
You get a cryptic noun here, a fragmented verb there. You can sort of guess the tone, but you don't truly understand the full weight of the communication until you finally get that person face-to-face in the room with you.
And that face-to-face conversation is the entire point of the opening of Hebrews. The author is declaring that with the arrival of the Son, that fragmented, piece-by-piece era of communication is officially terminated.
It's over.
Yes, the complete picture, the puzzle box lid, has finally been placed on the table.
Which brings up a really fascinating tension in human psychology, I think. Because if Jesus is presented as this ultimate, final box lid, it heavily clashes with how we are wired to consume things today.
Oh, for sure.
We live in an era obsessed with planned obsolescence.
You mean the assumption that everything has a shelf life?
Exactly. I mean, cars are literally engineered to rust out or break down after a few years, so you have to buy the newer model.
Right? Or smartphones.
Yes, smartphones miraculously slow down right when the shiny new version hits the shelves. It's like clockwork. We are deeply conditioned by our culture to believe that whatever is chronologically newer is automatically superior.
It's the newer is better myth.
Yeah.
And that psychological conditioning bleeds directly into how humanity approaches religion and revelation.
How so?
Well, if we look at the major world religions, Islam is unique in that it started nearly 600 years after Christianity. And often simply because that chronological timeline, there's a cultural assumption that a later revelation must be an upgrade or a correction to the older one.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting. Because Islam views Jesus with deep respect, but strictly as a prophet in a long line of prophets.
Yes, a messenger.
But Hebrews emphatically states that Jesus is the Son, meaning he is the final ultimate word. He isn't just another puzzle piece, he's the whole box.
It's a complete picture.
Exactly. So logically, wouldn't accepting a chronologically newer prophet actually mean going backward in terms of revelation?
It would.
It would be like deciding to upgrade your smartphone to the newest, latest model on the market, only to open the box and discover the latest model is actually a 1990s pager.
Right. The pager might be newer to you, like you
Yeah.
bought it more recently, but the technology is a massive regression.
Exactly.
And that is precisely the author's argument to these early Christians. They were tempted to go back to the old prophets, the old rituals. But Hebrews insists that in these last days, putting Jesus back to the category of a mere prophet or mere messenger is a monumental step backward no matter what comes after chronologically.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least dig deeper. Sure.
Because if he's not just another prophet, if he's the full smartphone and not the pager, what exactly is this Son? Because the material paints this massive three-dimensional portrait of him that honestly made my head spin a little when I read it.
Oh, the author stretches the human imagination to its absolute blanking point here. They map out the Son's relationship in three distinct directions: to the cosmos, to the Creator, and finally, to us.
Okay, let's start with the cosmos.
Let's do it. The text anchors him in the past, present, and future. Looking to the past, he is identified as the Creator.
Right.
Long before he was a first-century carpenter in Nazareth shaping wooden tables, he actually engineered the concept of wood. He made the trees. He made the oceans.
Wow. And looking to the future, the source says he is named the heir of all things, which honestly sounds a bit legalistic.
It is deeply legalistic, but in a cosmic sense. It means he holds the ultimate trust deed to the entire universe. Every star, every galaxy eventually defaults to his ownership.
That's huge. It is. But the most mind-bending part is the present reality, where it says he is the sustainer.
Okay, this is the part where ancient theology and modern physics collide, and it is just wild.
Oh, I get so excited about this part. Think about the terrifying reality of space.
Hmm.
As we sit here speaking, The Earth is spinning and hurtling through a vacuum at 19 miles per second.
19 miles per second, that is so fast.
It's incomprehensible. And ancient cultures were terrified of this void. They invented myths like Atlas carrying the globe on his shoulders or, giant cosmic elephants holding up the Earth just to feel a sense of stability.
To make it feel safe.
Right. But this text strips all that mythology away and claims the Earth is hanging on absolutely nothing, sustained purely by the powerful word of the sun.
19 miles a second, hanging in an infinite void held together by a word. That is a terrifyingly huge view of the cosmos.
It really is.
But what about his relationship to the Creator? How does the material explain that dynamic without just saying, he's God and leaving it at that?
Well, the author uses two very precise metaphors: radiance and the exact stamp.
Okay.
Let's take radiance first. Sunlight travels from our sun at 186,000 miles per second. It takes about 8 minutes to hit your skin here on Earth.
Right.
That sunlight is direct radiance, right? It is the sun actually reaching out and touching you.
As opposed to moonlight, which is just the sun bouncing off a dead rock.
Exactly. A reflection is safe.
Yeah.
You can stare at the moon. Direct radiance is dangerous. The text claims Jesus is the direct radiance of God's glory, not a bounced reflection.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When the Apostle Paul encountered this direct glory on the Damascus Road, the text says it was brighter than the midday sun, and his retinas were physically burned and blinded by it.
That is intense. Which brings up the second concept, the stamp. And I struggled with this one a bit. Is the text saying he is like a genetic clone of God? Or is it more like a perfect reflection in a pristine mirror?
It's actually much more industrial and authoritative than a reflection. David Pawson shared a brilliant real-world story to clarify this.
Oh, right, the Chelsea studio story.
Yes. There was a woman working in a tiny, specialized studio in Chelsea, London, and her sole, highly skilled job was to carefully carve a plaster cast of the Queen's head.
Okay.
That precise cast was then taken, shrunk down, and used by the Royal Mint to physically stamp the Queen's image onto every single coin in the realm.
So it's not just a picture of the Queen. It's the thing that gives the metal its actual value. It is the unimpeachable authority of the realm pressed right into the coin.
Exactly. The Greek word used there is character, which is where we get our word character. It literally means an engraved mark. Jesus is described as the exact representation, the flawless, authoritative stamp of God's very being. Every ounce of God's personality, justice, and mercy is stamped perfectly into the sun.
So what does this all mean when you step back and look at this portrait? The sheer irony is breathtaking.
Absolutely.
You have a man who walked the dusty, brutal roads of the ancient Middle East for 33 years. He was homeless. He owned essentially nothing but the clothes on his back. And yet, this text declares that this specific man engineered the trees, sustains the earth spinning at 19 miles a second, carries the flawless, blinding stamp of the Creator, and holds the ultimate trust deed to the entire universe.
It is the most radical claim ever made about a human being, period. But the author isn't just writing cosmic poetry to sound impressive. This three-dimensional portrait has immediate, boots-on-the-ground implications for how humanity approaches the divine.
Right, it's very practical.
Very. It fundamentally dismantles the ancient religious framework of shadows and rituals, and it replaces it with tangible substance.
Wait, but wasn't the whole point of ancient religion to have human priests manage that relationship? Why would this cosmic portrait make those ancient priests obsolete?
Because of the limitations of human priests. If you pull from that Superior Christ series, they explain the Latin word for priest is pontifex, which translates to bridge builder.
A bridge builder, okay.
Yeah. These men were tasked with building a bridge between a perfectly holy God and a deeply flawed humanity. But their bridge was built on a terrible foundation.
Because they themselves were flawed.
Partially, yes, but mostly because the tools they used, thousands upon thousands of slaughtered bulls and goats, could never permanently remove human guilt. It was just a temporary cover.
Just managing the symptom, never curing the disease.
Precisely. And because the work was temporary, the work was never done. If you walked into the ancient temple, you would never see a chair in the inner sanctum.
Wait, really? No chairs?
None. The priests stood day after day, year after year, in this bloody, exhausting marathon of repetitive sacrifice.
Wow.
Now, contrast that endless standing with what the Son did. The text explains that Jesus provided purification for sins, which was a task he had to endure entirely by himself, isolated and crying out on a Roman cross.
Yeah.
He accomplished in one moment what millions of animal sacrifices never could. The bridge wasn't just started, it was completed. And what did he do afterward?
He sat down.
He ascended to the highest heaven, and, as Hebrews states, he sat down at the right hand of God.
I have to admit, the standing versus sitting dynamic is a detail I completely missed before, but it is just brilliant. It's the ultimate theological mic drop.
It really is.
He just took a seat because the agonizing marathon of ancient religion was finally over. The work was actually finished.
It is a profound shift.
Mm-hmm.
So, he sits down, the bridge is permanently built, and humanity's value is permanently secured. And that intrinsic value actually circles us right back to that stamp analogy we discussed earlier.
Oh, wait, the image of God.
Yes. If humanity bears the image of God, this source material argues that has massive ethical implications for how we treat human life today. Which brings us to a highly sensitive modern debate.
Right, and we need to pause here and be incredibly clear with you, the listener. The material we are analyzing specifically takes this concept that human life bears the exact stamp or image of God and uses it to argue against euthanasia.
Yes.
And as your host, we are absolutely not endorsing or taking a side on this politically charged issue.
Not at all.
Our job is strict neutrality. We are simply imparting the philosophical argument exactly as the text presents it.
Right, and faithfully representing their argument means explaining their logic. And their logic is that because every single human being bears a reflection of this divine stamp, willfully ending a life, even in the context of euthanasia, is considered a violation within their theological framework.
Got it.
They argue that you are ultimately interfering with or destroying a vessel that carries the image of God.
Exactly. That is how the source interprets the ethical boundaries of this theology. But let's bring all of this, the spinning earth, the blinding radiance, the high priest finally taking a seat. Let's bring all of that cosmic weight back down to your daily marathon of life.
The practical application.
Yeah. How does the author of Hebrews practically advise us to handle our own spiritual fatigue?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the material offers a highly practical, enduring analogy for navigating life. Faith is like riding a bicycle.
A bicycle.
Yeah, the basic mechanics of a bicycle dictate that you cannot simply pause and hover in midair. If you do not maintain forward momentum, gravity takes over and you will inevitably fall off.
You're either pedaling or you're crashing. There is no neutral gear.
Right, and this directly addresses the core problem that original Exhausted audience was facing, which is drifting.
Drifting.
Yeah, the sermon series makes a point here that I think is absolutely vital for anyone experiencing spiritual apathy today. Drifting does not require a violent, dramatic rejection of your beliefs.
Right, you don't have to just suddenly denounce everything.
Exactly, you don't have to formally denounce everything you once held true or burn your life to the ground. Drifting simply requires neglect.
Wow.
It's like a boat sitting in the water without an anchor. You don't feel yourself moving, the scenery looks the same for a while, but slowly, imperceptibly, the silent current pulls you miles offshore and right into danger.
That is painfully relatable. I mean, we rarely destroy our lives in one sudden explosion, right? It's usually the slow fate of just not paying attention.
Yeah, it's insidious.
But the author of Hebrews is pleading with them, trying to shock them awake by reminding them of the sheer, incalculable value of what they now possess compared to the comfortable rituals they left behind. The source phrased it beautifully, actually. You haven't dropped gold to pick up mud. You've dropped a handful of mud for a handful of gold.
That's a great quote. And when you deeply understand that the gold you are holding is the final word of God, the sustainer of the spinning universe, and a high priest who has already finished the excruciating work and sat down in victory.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of drifting back to the mud of your old life becomes totally illogical.
It really does. Which brings us to our final thought for today. Earlier, we talked about that stamp, the unimpeachable image of God pressed into humanity.
Right, the queen's head on the coin.
Exactly. And David Pawson shared this personal story about giving his son an ancient 2,000-year-old Roman Republic coin.
I remember this.
Yeah, at first glance, it looked like a worthless, dirty lump of metal. It was scratched, heavily worn down, and almost completely effaced by time and abuse. But when they got a magnifying glass and looked closely, they could just barely make out the original stamp of a dolphin in a galley ship.
Right.
And because of that faded, nearly invisible stamp, that lump of metal was incredibly valuable.
It's a beautiful, haunting metaphor for humanity. Some people we encounter in life are so worn down by trauma, their actions so marred by flaws and poor choices, that the divine image they carry is incredibly hard to see.
Yeah.
But no matter how scratched up the metal gets, the original stamp is still there.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week. If every single person you pass on the street tomorrow, the frustrated cashier, the driver who cuts you off in traffic, the stranger on the subway you completely ignore, if every single one of them bears a faded, scratched up stamp of the creator of the universe, how might viewing those strangers as infinitely valuable pieces of cosmic currency completely change the way you interact with the world tomorrow?
That is a perspective shift that changes absolutely everything about how we walk through a crowded room.
It truly is. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.